We're about to step into the secret gardens of the pharaohs, where ancient Egyptians discovered plants that could calm the mind, heal the body, and connect the soul to the divine. These weren't just decorative flowers or simple herbs. They were powerful botanical treasures that shaped medicine, religion, and daily life along the Nile for over 3,000 years. From the blue lotus that opened the third eye to the frankincense that carried prayers to the gods, we're uncovering the real science and stunning history behind Egypt's most calming plants. Before we go back in time together, if you're enjoying settling in for the night with a bit of Egyptian history, consider hitting subscribe. And I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to experience the same calm that Cleopatra herself might have felt after a long day of ruling an empire? The answer lies in a single blue flower that floated on the Nile's waters, a flower so important that it appeared in countless tomb paintings, temple carvings, and even in the hands of King Tutankhamun himself. The blue lotus, known scientifically as Nymphaea caerulea, wasn't actually a lotus at all. It was a water lily. But don't let that technical detail fool you. This misnamed plant was perhaps the most significant calming botanical in all of ancient Egypt. When archaeologists opened King Tut's tomb in 1922, they found the dried petals of blue lotus flowers scattered across his mummy, placed there over 3,000 years ago. Why would the ancients consider this flower so vital that it needed to accompany a pharaoh into the afterlife? Let me paint you a picture of the Nile Delta at dawn, around 1500 BCE. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, and the waters are still cool and dark. Then, as the first rays of light touch the river's surface, something magical happens. Hundreds, maybe thousands of blue lotus flowers begin to open, their petals unfurling in perfect synchronization with the sunrise. The ancient Egyptians watched this happen every single morning, and they saw in it something profound: the daily rebirth of the sun god Ra, the promise of renewal, the cycle of life, death, and resurrection that defined their entire worldview. But the blue lotus wasn't just symbolically important. The Egyptians were brilliant observers of nature, and they quickly discovered that this flower did something to the mind and body. When the petals were steeped in wine or simply smelled deeply, people reported feeling a gentle wave of relaxation wash over them. Warriors who had seen the brutality of battle could find peace. Priests preparing for lengthy ceremonies could achieve the calm focus they needed. Even common workers, exhausted from hauling limestone blocks for the pyramids, could find a moment of relief. Modern science has finally caught up with what the Egyptians knew thousands of years ago. Researchers have identified several psychoactive compounds in the blue lotus, including apomorphine and nuciferine. Apomorphine interacts with dopamine receptors in the brain, the same pathways involved in pleasure and relaxation. Nuciferine has been shown in laboratory studies to have sedative properties and may help regulate certain neurotransmitters. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2008 confirmed that extracts from Nymphaea caerulea do indeed have measurable calming effects on the central nervous system. The Egyptians had multiple ways of using the blue lotus. The most common method was to steep the fresh flowers in wine, creating what we might call the world's first botanical cocktail. They would fill large ceramic vessels with wine and float whole lotus flowers in them, letting them soak for days. The resulting drink was consumed at festivals, religious ceremonies, and social gatherings. Imagine the scene at a feast in Thebes: musicians playing harps and drums, dancers swirling in linen garments, and everyone sipping blue lotus wine that made the whole experience feel dreamlike and peaceful. Another method was direct inhalation. The Egyptians would hold fresh lotus flowers close to their faces and breathe deeply taking in the flower's natural fragrance along with the volatile compounds it released. Wall paintings from the tomb of Nebamun, a wealthy accountant who lived around 1350 BCE, show party guests holding lotus flowers directly under their noses during a banquet. Some paintings even show people with lotus flowers tied to their heads, ensuring a constant, gentle exposure to the flower's aroma throughout the evening. The elite classes took blue lotus use even further. They would crush the dried petals into a fine powder and mix it with other herbs to create incense. When burned, this incense would fill temple chambers and palace rooms with fragrant smoke believed to facilitate communication with the divine. The famous Egyptian queen Hatshepsut, one of the few female pharaohs, was known to use blue lotus incense during her morning rituals. Historical records suggest she believed it helped her achieve the mental clarity needed to govern her kingdom effectively. Temple priests had their own special relationship with the blue lotus. Before performing important religious rites, they would undergo purification ceremonies that often included blue lotus. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most important medical texts from ancient Egypt, dating to around 1550 BCE, contains several prescriptions that include blue lotus as a key ingredient. One formula describes mixing blue lotus petals with honey and beer to create a drink for easing nervousness and promoting restful sleep. The connection between blue lotus and the divine went deeper than just ritual use. The flower itself was associated with several major gods. The sun god Ra was said to have emerged from a giant blue lotus at the moment of creation. The god Nefertum, whose name literally means beautiful closure or perfect ending, was specifically the deity of the blue lotus and was often depicted as a young man with a lotus flower on his head. Egyptians believed that smelling the lotus or consuming it brought them closer to Nefertum and, through him, to divine peace. Archaeological evidence for blue lotus use is everywhere once you know what to look for. Excavations at workers' villages near the pyramids have uncovered pottery jars with residue that chemical analysis confirmed contained traces of blue lotus compounds mixed with wine. These weren't royal tombs or temple sites. These were the homes of ordinary workers, which tells us that blue lotus use had spread throughout Egyptian society, not just among the wealthy elite. One particularly fascinating discovery came from the temple complex at Karnak. Archaeologists found a dedicated pool, carefully constructed and maintained, that was used exclusively for growing blue lotus flowers for temple ceremonies. The pool included sophisticated irrigation systems and was positioned to receive optimal sunlight. This wasn't a casual garden. It was an industrial-scale operation for producing sacred plants, showing us just how important blue lotus was to Egyptian religious and medical practices. The trade in blue lotus extended far beyond Egypt's borders. Egyptian merchants exported dried lotus flowers to ancient Greece, Rome, and throughout the Mediterranean world. Greek texts from the classical period mention an Egyptian flower that produces pleasant dreams and gentle euphoria, almost certainly a reference to the blue lotus. This international trade meant that Egypt's botanical knowledge spread throughout the ancient world, influencing medical practices in cultures that would survive long after the pharaohs had fallen. But why did the blue lotus work so effectively as a calming agent? Beyond the chemical compounds we mentioned earlier, there's another factor, what we might call the ritual and cultural power of the plant. When an ancient Egyptian consumed blue lotus, they weren't just taking in alkaloids and volatile compounds. They were participating in a practice with thousands of years of cultural weight behind it. They were connecting to their gods, their ancestors, and their understanding of cosmic order. This psychological dimension amplified the plant's natural calming properties in ways that modern isolated chemical compounds often can't replicate. There's a profound lesson here that modern researchers are only beginning to fully appreciate. The ancient Egyptians didn't separate medicine from spirituality or pharmacology from ritual. When they used blue lotus, the entire context mattered. the time of day, the prayers spoken, the people present, the setting, the intention. Contemporary studies on the placebo effect and the importance of set and setting in therapeutic experiences are confirming what the Egyptians intuitively understood. Healing and calm come not just from chemical compounds, but from the entire human experience surrounding those compounds. The decline of Blue Lotus use is a story of changing civilizations. When Rome conquered Egypt in 30 BCE, many Egyptian practices were suppressed or transformed. Early Christianity, which eventually dominated the region, viewed many ancient Egyptian practices as pagan and actively worked to eliminate them. The knowledge of how to properly cultivate and prepare Blue Lotus began to fade. By the medieval period, the flower had largely disappeared from Egyptian medicine and culture, remembered only in ancient texts and temple carvings. Today, there's a revival of interest in the Blue Lotus. Ethnobotanists, historians, and even some modern herbalists are working to understand exactly how the ancient Egyptians used this plant. The flower itself still grows in parts of Africa and Asia, and dried Blue Lotus is available through various specialty suppliers. However, it's crucial to note that modern use should be approached with caution and proper research. The ancient Egyptians had generations of accumulated knowledge about proper dosing, preparation, and use that we're still trying to fully reconstruct. What can we learn from the Blue Lotus today? Perhaps it's a reminder that calm and peace don't always require modern pharmaceuticals. The ancient Egyptians achieved sophisticated understanding of botanical medicine using only careful observation, experimentation, and respect for nature. They understood that sometimes the most powerful remedies come not from synthesizing new compounds in laboratories, but from working with the plants that have co-evolved with humans for thousands of years, plants that our ancestors knew intimately and used with wisdom. Chapter 2. Frankincense and Myrrh, the resins of divine peace. What would you pay for a substance so precious that it was literally worth its weight in gold? In ancient Egypt, there were two aromatic resins that commanded exactly that kind of value: frankincense and myrrh. These weren't just expensive luxuries for the wealthy. They were fundamental to Egyptian religious practice, medicine, and the pursuit of mental tranquility. The question is, what made these tree saps so incredibly valuable, and did they actually work to calm the mind and heal the body? Let's travel to the land of Punt, a mysterious region that ancient Egyptians called God's Land. Most historians now believe Punt was located somewhere along the Horn of Africa, in what might be modern-day Somalia, Eritrea, or Yemen. This was the legendary source of the finest frankincense and myrrh, and Egyptian pharaohs organized massive expeditions to obtain these precious resins. The most famous of these expeditions was organized by Queen Hatshepsut around 1470 BCE, and she was so proud of it that she had the entire journey documented in detailed reliefs on the walls of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. These reliefs show us exactly what the expedition to Punt looked like. We see Egyptian ships with their distinctive curved prows sailing down the Red Sea. We see the land of Punt with its distinctive round houses on stilts and its lush vegetation. Most importantly for our story, we see frankincense trees, carefully illustrated with their characteristic peeling bark and sparse leaves. The Egyptians didn't just bring back resins, they attempted to bring back living trees to transplant in Egypt, creating the world's first recorded international plant transplantation project. But what exactly are frankincense and myrrh? Both are resins, sticky aromatic substances produced by trees when their bark is cut or damaged. Frankincense comes primarily from trees in the Boswellia genus, particularly Boswellia sacra. When the tree's bark is deliberately scored, it oozes a milky white sap that hardens into tear-shaped droplets. These droplets, ranging from pale yellow to amber in colour, are frankincense. Myrrh comes from Commiphora trees, particularly Commiphora myrrha, and is harvested in the same way, though myrrh resin tends to be darker, ranging from golden brown to reddish black. The ancient Egyptians burned these resins as incense in virtually every religious ceremony. Walk into any Egyptian temple at dawn, and the first thing that would hit you would be the smoke. Priests would light fires in special incense burners, often elaborately decorated bronze vessels shaped like the arm of a god extending from the earth, and place chunks of frankincense and myrrh on the hot coals. The smoke that rose was believed to carry prayers directly to the gods. The Egyptian word for frankincense was sonta, which literally meant that which makes divine. But beyond the religious symbolism, something very real was happening to the people breathing that smoke. Modern chemical analysis has revealed that when frankincense burns, it releases a compound called incensol acetate. Research published in the FASEB journal in 2008 by researchers at Johns Hopkins University and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem found that incensol acetate activates poorly understood ion channels in the brain that are involved in the regulation of emotions. In laboratory mice, exposure to this compound reduced anxiety-like behaviors and produced effects similar to modern antidepressant drugs. The study's lead author, Dr. Aryeh Moussaieff, explained that incensol acetate appears to work on the TRPV3 receptor, a protein found in the brain that affects emotional regulation. This wasn't just about a pleasant smell creating a positive mood. This was about actual brain chemistry being altered by compounds released when frankincense burns. The ancient Egyptians, who burned frankincense daily in their temples, were essentially conducting large-scale aromatherapy treatments that had genuine neurological effects. Myrrh had its own impressive properties. While it was also burned as incense, the Egyptians discovered that myrrh was particularly powerful when used topically or consumed in small amounts. The Ebers Papyrus lists myrrh as an ingredient in dozens of medicinal formulas, used for everything from treating wounds to easing stomach problems to reducing anxiety. Modern research has confirmed that myrrh contains compounds with genuine anti-inflammatory and analgesic properties. A study published in Phytotherapy Research in 2015 found that myrrh extracts have significant antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects, which could explain why the Egyptians found it so effective for promoting healing and comfort. The calming properties of these resins weren't limited to their smoke or direct application. The Egyptians created elaborate perfumes and anointing oils using frankincense and myrrh as key ingredients. These weren't simple mixtures. Egyptian perfume making was a sophisticated art that required years of training. Perfumers would combine the resins with dozens of other ingredients, animal fats to carry the scents, flower essences, exotic spices, creating complex formulations that could take months to prepare properly. One famous formula, known as kaifi, was considered the king of Egyptian incenses and perfumes. Kaifi was so important that the formula was carved into the walls of temples at Edfu and Philae. The Greek historian Plutarch, writing in the 1st century CE, described kaifi as having the power to calm anxiety and brighten dreams. He wrote that it was composed of 16 different ingredients, including frankincense, myrrh, honey, wine, raisins, and various aromatic plants. When burned at night, kaifi was said to ease the mind into peaceful sleep, while its fragrance filled homes with divine presence. Archaeological evidence supports these ancient claims. Residue analysis from jars found in royal tombs has confirmed the presence of frankincense and myrrh in various perfume and incense preparations. At the tomb of Tutankhamun, archaeologists found several alabaster jars that once contained scented ointments. When analysed, these ointments showed traces of frankincense and myrrh mixed with animal fats and other botanicals. The young pharaoh had been sent into the afterlife with the most precious calming substances Egypt could provide. The use of these resins extended into mummification, the most sacred of Egyptian practices. The embalmers used vast quantities of both frankincense and myrrh during the mummification process. They would pack the body cavities with these resins, both for their preservative antimicrobial properties and for their spiritual significance. The fragrance of these resins was believed to purify the deceased and make them acceptable to the gods. Chemical analysis of mummy tissue has confirmed the presence of both frankincense and myrrh compounds absorbed into the preserved flesh, sometimes still detectable after more than 3,000 years. The economic importance of frankincense and myrrh cannot be overstated. These resins were so valuable that they shaped international relations and trade routes throughout the ancient world. Egyptian temples consumed enormous quantities. The great temple of Amun at Karnak, during its peak, burned through thousands of pounds of frankincense annually. This demand created a trade network that stretched from Egypt through Arabia to the Horn of Africa and possibly even to India, where related Boswellia species grow. Control of this trade brought immense wealth and power. The Nabateans, an Arab people who controlled key sections of the frankincense trade route, became wealthy enough to build the stunning rock-cut city of Petra. The Romans eventually went to war to control these trade routes, understanding that whoever controlled the supply of frankincense and myrrh controlled access to substances that were essential for religion, medicine, and luxury throughout the ancient world. For the average Egyptian, frankincense and myrrh weren't everyday substances. They were expensive, often reserved for religious ceremonies, special occasions, or medical emergencies. However, when someone in ancient Egypt experienced severe anxiety or emotional distress, a visit to a temple might include treatment with these precious resins. Priests, who served as both religious leaders and medical practitioners, would burn frankincense and myrrh while performing healing rituals, creating an environment saturated with the compounds we now know have genuine psychoactive and calming properties. There's a beautiful scroll in the British Museum dating from around 1200 BCE that describes a temple healing ceremony. The text instructs the priest to purify the treatment room with water from a sacred pool, to light fires of frankincense and myrrh, and to have the patient breathe deeply of the smoke while prayers are recited. The ceremony combines what we now recognize as legitimate aromatherapy with meditation, prayer, and the placebo effect of ritual, all working together to create a powerful healing experience. The reverence for frankincense and myrrh spread far beyond Egypt. When the Christian Bible describes the gifts brought to the infant Jesus by the Magi, 2 of the 3 gifts mentioned are frankincense and myrrh. This wasn't random. Those authors, writing centuries after the height of ancient Egypt but still within the sphere of Egyptian cultural influence, were indicating that the child being honoured was worthy of the most precious substances known to the ancient world, substances associated with divinity, healing, and peace. In traditional Chinese medicine, frankincense, known as ru xiang, and myrrh, known as mo yao, are still used today for reducing pain and inflammation and for promoting circulation and healing. Ayurvedic medicine in India similarly employs these resins. The ancient Egyptian knowledge about these substances spread along trade routes and became incorporated into healing traditions across much of the Old World. The Egyptians weren't the only culture to discover the value of these resins, but they were among the first to use them systematically and to understand their calming properties. Modern clinical research continues to explore the therapeutic potential of frankincense and myrrh. A study published in the journal Oncology Letters in 2018 found that frankincense essential oil had significant anti-anxiety effects in cancer patients undergoing treatment. Patients who received aromatherapy with frankincense oil reported lower anxiety levels compared to control groups. Other studies have examined the anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving properties of these resins, finding measurable beneficial effects that validate their traditional use. The sustainability of frankincense and myrrh production is now a concern. The trees that produce these resins are under pressure from overharvesting and climate change. Some Boswellia and Commiphora species are now considered vulnerable or endangered. This creates a tragic irony. The same resins that the ancient Egyptians valued so highly that they organized international expeditions to obtain them are now at risk of disappearing due to overexploitation. Conservation efforts are underway, but the situation reminds us that these natural resources are finite and precious, just as the ancient Egyptians understood. What would it be like to experience frankincense and myrrh the way an ancient Egyptian did? Not as isolated essential oils purchased online, but as part of a complete ritual experience in a temple filled with painted columns, the Nile visible through the entrance, priests chanting in a language as melodious as it was ancient. The resins were never just commodities to the Egyptians. They were bridges between the human and the divine, between suffering and peace, between the chaos of daily life and the eternal order of the cosmos. Perhaps that's the deepest lesson these resins teach us, that the most effective healing often comes when we address not just the body or the mind in isolation, but when we create experiences that engage our whole being. Chapter 3. The Opium Poppy, Egypt's controversial comforter. What happens when we discover that one of humanity's most dangerous drugs was also one of ancient Egypt's most trusted medicines? The opium poppy presents us with a profound paradox. On one hand, it's the source of devastating addiction and countless ruined lives. On the other hand, it's given humanity some of our most effective pain relievers and has been used medicinally for at least 5,000 years. The ancient Egyptians knew this plant well, and they used it in ways that might surprise you. The question we need to ask is, how did they manage to use such a powerful substance without the catastrophic consequences we see today? The opium poppy, Papaver somniferum, is a beautiful plant. If you saw it growing in a field, you might not immediately recognize its dark reputation. The flowers are stunning, large, delicate petals in shades of white, pink, red, or purple surrounding a central seed pod. It's this seed pod that contains the magic and the danger. When the unripe seed pod is scored with a knife, it oozes a white latex that darkens to brown as it dries. This dried latex is raw opium, containing morphine, codeine, and several other powerful alkaloids that can eliminate pain, induce euphoria, and create profound physical dependence. Did the ancient Egyptians actually use opium? For many years, this was a matter of scholarly debate. The evidence was suggestive but not conclusive. Egyptian medical papyri mentioned a substance called SBN, or shepen, that had powerful sedative and pain-relieving properties. But the exact identity of this substance was unclear. The breakthrough came from archaeological chemistry. Researchers examining residues in ancient Egyptian vessels and analyzing tissue samples from mummies have detected the presence of opioid compounds, confirming that yes, the ancient Egyptians did indeed know and use opium. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence comes from a late-period Egyptian tomb, where archaeologists found juglets, small ceramic vessels with distinctive pointed bases. These juglets were nearly identical to vessels known from Cyprus that were specifically designed for storing and transporting opium. Chemical analysis of residue inside the Egyptian juglets confirmed the presence of opium alkaloids. The ancient Egyptians were importing opium, probably from Cyprus or other Mediterranean sources, for medicinal use. The medical papyri give us insight into how opium was used. The Ebers Papyrus, that treasure trove of Egyptian medical knowledge we mentioned earlier, contains a prescription to prevent excessive crying in children. The formula includes opium mixed with fly excrement, which sounds absolutely horrifying to modern ears. But look past the unsanitary ingredient, a common feature of ancient medicine across many cultures, and focus on the opium. The Egyptians were using it as a pediatric sedative to calm crying babies and help them sleep. Before you recoil in horror at the idea of giving opium to infants, consider this. Until shockingly recently, opium-based baby soothers were common in Europe and America. Laudanum and Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, both containing opium, were given to babies well into the late 19th century. The ancient Egyptians were doing something that remained standard medical practice for thousands of years afterward. The difference is that they apparently used it more judiciously in specific medical contexts rather than as an everyday convenience. For adults, opium was prescribed for serious pain relief. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, which dates to around 1600 BCE, but copies much older material, is primarily a surgical text dealing with traumatic injuries. It describes treatments for everything from skull fractures to spinal injuries, and several of these treatments include formulas containing what's almost certainly opium. Imagine being an ancient Egyptian soldier who has taken a spear wound to the gut, an agonizing and often fatal injury. The physician treating you would clean and bandage the wound, but for the overwhelming pain, opium dissolved in wine might be your only relief. The Egyptians also used opium in treating eye conditions. This might seem odd until you consider that eye diseases were extremely common in ancient Egypt. The bright sun, the sand carried on desert winds, the flies that bred in irrigation canals, all contributed to chronic eye problems throughout the population. Several prescriptions in the medical papyri describe treatments for painful eye conditions that include opium as an ingredient. Modern ophthalmology has confirmed that some opioids can reduce certain types of eye pain, so the Egyptian approach had merit. Religious and ritual use of opium in Egypt is harder to document, but probably occurred. Some scholars have suggested that the opium goddess figurines found in Cyprus, showing female figures with arms raised and wearing crowns that resemble inverted poppy seed pods, represent a poppy cult that may have had connections to Egypt. While direct evidence is limited, it's entirely plausible that Egyptian priests used opium in specific ritual contexts, perhaps to achieve visionary states or to communicate with the divine, much as they used Blue Lotus and frankincense. The key question is how the Egyptians avoided the addiction problems that plague opium use today. Several factors were probably at work. First, opium in ancient Egypt was expensive and relatively scarce, imported from abroad and controlled by medical professionals and temples. It wasn't something the average person could easily obtain for recreational use. Second, it was formulated in specific ways, mixed with other substances, and used in contexts where dosage was controlled. Third, and perhaps most importantly, it was embedded in a cultural and medical framework that emphasized healing and divine intervention rather than pleasure-seeking. Modern pharmaceutical science has learned to isolate and concentrate the active compounds in opium. Morphine, first isolated in 1804, is far more potent than crude opium. Heroin, synthesized in 1874, is even more powerful and addictive. The ancient Egyptians were using the whole plant material, which contains not just morphine but also codeine, thebaine, and other alkaloids that may have modulating effects. Some researchers have suggested that whole plant opium preparations are actually less addictive than isolated morphine because the multiple compounds interact in complex ways that aren't fully understood. There's also the matter of administration method. The Egyptians primarily consumed opium orally, dissolved in wine or mixed into medicinal pastes. Oral administration produces slower, less intense effects than smoking or injecting opium, which are the methods that tend to produce the most rapid addiction. When opium is swallowed, it must pass through the digestive system and the liver before reaching the brain, which slows absorption and reduces the intensity of the euphoric rush that drives addictive behavior. Archaeological evidence suggests that opium use in Egypt remained relatively controlled throughout pharaonic history. There are no Egyptian texts describing widespread opium addiction or social problems caused by opium use, which is in stark contrast to what happened when opium became widely available in China and other places in later historical periods. This suggests that the Egyptians successfully managed to use a powerful and potentially dangerous substance primarily for its legitimate medical benefits. The transition from ancient medical use to modern addiction crisis is a complex historical process. When European colonial powers began cultivating opium on an industrial scale in the 18th and 19th centuries, particularly in India, for export to China, opium transformed from a relatively scarce medicine into a mass-produced commodity. The British East India Company alone exported thousands of tons of opium annually to China, creating millions of addicts and ultimately provoking the Opium Wars. This represented a complete departure from the controlled medical use that characterized ancient Egyptian practice. Today, we face an opioid crisis that kills tens of thousands of people annually in the United States alone. The irony is painful. We have more knowledge about pharmacology than any previous civilization, yet we're experiencing catastrophic problems with the very substances that ancient peoples used relatively safely. What went wrong? Part of the answer is potency. Our opioids are far stronger than anything available in ancient times. Part is availability. Opioids became widely prescribed for routine pain management in ways that would have been unthinkable in ancient Egypt. Part is context. We've lost the cultural and spiritual frameworks that guided the use of powerful plant medicines in ancient societies. There's an important distinction to make here. I'm not romanticizing ancient Egyptian medicine or suggesting we should return to their practices. Ancient Egyptian medicine had severe limitations. It was mixed with magic and religion in ways that often made it ineffective, and it was based on incorrect understanding of human anatomy and disease. But when it came to using powerful plant substances like opium, the Egyptians demonstrated a kind of wisdom that we've lost. They understood that power demands respect, that strong medicines should be reserved for serious conditions, and that the context of use matters as much as the substance itself. Modern medicine is beginning to relearn some of these lessons. The pendulum has swung from overprescription of opioids for even minor pain to increasing recognition that these drugs should be reserved for severe pain situations, where benefits clearly outweigh risks. There's also growing interest in whole plant medicines and in the importance of set and setting, the psychological and social context in which medicines are used. These are all principles the ancient Egyptians would have recognized. For the ancient Egyptian experiencing severe pain from injury or disease, opium represented mercy. It meant the difference between suffering that drove people mad and bearable discomfort that allowed healing to occur. In a world without anesthesia, without modern surgical techniques, without antibiotics, opium was one of the few truly effective tools available to physicians. It was literally a godsend, and the Egyptians treated it as such, using it carefully, respectfully, and primarily in contexts of genuine medical need. The legacy of Egyptian opium use extends through history in interesting ways. Greek physicians, including Hippocrates and Galen, learned much of their medical knowledge from Egyptian sources and continued to use opium, as the Egyptians had, primarily for pain relief and sedation. This knowledge passed to Arab physicians during the Islamic Golden Age, who refined and expanded it. Eventually it reached medieval Europe, where opium remained a standard medicine through the Renaissance and into the modern era. The line from ancient Egyptian medical papyri to your modern pharmacy is more direct than you might think. What can we take away from the Egyptian experience with opium? Perhaps it's a reminder that powerful substances are not inherently good or evil. They're tools that can be used wisely or foolishly. The opium poppy itself is just a plant following its evolutionary programming, producing compounds that happen to interact powerfully with animal nervous systems. It was ancient human wisdom that figured out how to use these compounds to reduce suffering. It's modern human foolishness that has created systems that maximize harm. The plant hasn't changed. we have. Chapter 4. Lettuce, the unexpected sleep aid of ancient Egypt. What if I told you that one of ancient Egypt's most important calming plants is something you probably have in your refrigerator right now? You might think I'm joking, but I'm completely serious. Lettuce, humble, ordinary lettuce, was considered by the ancient Egyptians to be a powerful medicine for promoting sleep and reducing anxiety. But before you start making yourself a salad for insomnia, there's more to this story than you might think. The lettuce the Egyptians used was very different from the watery iceberg lettuce common in modern supermarkets, and they prepared it in specific ways that maximized its sedative properties. The ancient Egyptian word for lettuce was abu, and it appears frequently in medical texts, religious writings, and agricultural records. But the lettuce they cultivated was primarily Lactuca sativa var. Longifolia, a variety more similar to modern romaine lettuce, but allowed to grow much taller and to produce more of the white latex that gives the Lactuca genus its name. The Latin word Lactuca literally means milk producing, a reference to this milky sap that oozes from the stem when the plant is cut. This milky latex is the key to understanding why the Egyptians valued lettuce as a calming medicine. The sap contains several compounds called lactucins and lactucopicrin, which have mild sedative and analgesic properties. When lettuce plants are allowed to mature beyond the stage we typically harvest them for eating, they produce much more of this latex, and its effects become more pronounced. The ancient Egyptians discovered that if you collected this latex from mature lettuce plants, dried it, and consumed it in specific preparations, it could promote sleep and reduce pain. The evidence for lettuce as medicine comes from multiple sources. The Ebers Papyrus lists lettuce in several sedative formulas. One prescription describes mixing dried lettuce latex with other ingredients to create a drink for inducing sleep. Another formula uses lettuce in a treatment for restlessness and anxiety. These aren't casual mentions either. Lettuce appears in the medical papyri more frequently than many other plants, suggesting it was a commonly used remedy. Archaeological evidence supports the importance of lettuce in ancient Egypt. Excavations of workers' villages and urban sites have uncovered large quantities of lettuce seeds, far more than would be expected if lettuce were only valued as a food crop. Chemical analysis of residues in some storage jars has revealed the presence of lactucin compounds, confirming that the Egyptians were indeed extracting and storing lettuce latex for medicinal use. But lettuce in Egypt had another dimension that modern people find somewhat surprising and amusing. It was associated with the god Min, one of Egypt's fertility deities. Min was typically depicted as an ithyphallic figure, and lettuce was considered his sacred plant. The association seems odd until you understand the Egyptian reasoning. They observed that when lettuce plants matured and went to seed, they shot up tall, flowering stalks that oozed white sap when cut. The phallic imagery was obvious to the Egyptian mind, and they concluded that lettuce must promote male fertility and vigor. This association appears in Egyptian mythology, the contendings of Horus and Seth, a mythological text that tells the story of the struggle between these two gods for the throne of Egypt. Includes a scene involving lettuce that's both comical and rather inappropriate by modern standards. Seth eats lettuce from Horus's garden, not knowing that Horus has done something unsavory to it, leading to embarrassing consequences for Seth. The story is bawdy humor, but it also reinforces the Egyptian association between lettuce and sexuality. Modern scientific research has taken a serious look at the calming properties of lettuce and its relatives. Lactuca virosa, known as wild lettuce or opium lettuce, produces even more of the sedative latex than cultivated lettuce. While the effects are much milder than actual opium, studies have confirmed that lactucin and related compounds do have measurable sedative and pain-relieving properties. A study published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2006 found that lettuce extracts prolonged sleeping time in mice, and had pain-relieving effects comparable to low-dose ibuprofen. The mechanism of action appears to involve the central nervous system. Lactocins seem to affect certain neurotransmitter systems, possibly including adenosine receptors, which are involved in regulating sleep and wakefulness. The effects are subtle compared to pharmaceutical sleep aids, but they're real and measurable. This validates the ancient Egyptian use of lettuce as a mild sedative and calming agent. How did the Egyptians actually use lettuce for its medicinal properties? The most common method was to collect the latex from mature lettuce plants. This was done by making cuts in the stems and allowing the white sap to ooze out and dry into a resinous substance. This dried latex could then be dissolved in wine or beer and consumed before sleep. The Egyptians also ate fresh lettuce, but they recognized that the medicinal effects were stronger when the concentrated latex was used. Lettuce was also used in combination with other calming plants. Several Egyptian formulas combine lettuce with blue lotus and other sedative herbs to create more potent sleeping draughts. This shows sophisticated understanding of herbalism. The Egyptians recognized that combining multiple plants with complementary effects often produces better results than using any single plant alone. Modern herbalists call this synergy, and it's a principle that pharmaceutical companies are now studying seriously. For the common people of ancient Egypt, lettuce had the advantage of being easily cultivated and widely available. Unlike frankincense and myrrh, which had to be imported at great expense, or even blue lotus, which required water gardens to cultivate, lettuce could be grown in any field or household garden. This made it an accessible medicine for people of all social classes. A farmer suffering from poor sleep due to anxiety about the harvest could grow his own remedy right alongside his vegetables. The cultivation of lettuce was important enough that it appears in agricultural records and even in tomb paintings. Several tombs show scenes of lettuce being harvested and presented as offerings to the deceased, suggesting it was considered valuable enough to sustain someone in the afterlife. One tomb painting from the reign of Thutmose IV shows workers in a garden carefully tending tall lettuce plants, treating them with the care usually reserved for more obviously valuable crops. There's an interesting modern parallel to the Egyptian use of lettuce. In traditional Korean medicine, lettuce is considered to have cooling and calming properties, and lettuce tea is sometimes consumed to promote sleep. In traditional Iranian medicine, lettuce seeds are used for similar purposes. These practices developed independently of ancient Egypt, suggesting that people in different times and places have observed the same properties of lettuce and come to similar conclusions about its use. The decline of lettuce as medicine in the Western world is largely a story of the rise of more potent alternatives. As opium became more available, and later as synthetic sedatives and sleep aids were developed, mild remedies like lettuce fell out of favour. Why use something subtle when you can use something powerful? But this mindset overlooks an important point. Mild remedies often have milder side effects and lower addiction potential. The ancient Egyptians, working with what nature provided, had to make the most of gentle medicines, and in doing so, they may have avoided some of the problems that come with more aggressive pharmacological interventions. Today, there's renewed interest in lettuce and wild lettuce as natural sleep aids. You can find wild lettuce extracts sold as dietary supplements, usually marketed for promoting relaxation and supporting healthy sleep. The quality and potency of these products vary considerably, and they're not FDA regulated as drugs, so users should approach them with caution and realistic expectations. These are not going to produce the knockout effects of modern sleeping pills, but for people with mild sleep difficulties who prefer natural remedies, they might offer gentle support. The Egyptian experience with lettuce teaches us something important about the nature of medicine and healing. Not every effective remedy needs to be powerful. Sometimes gentle, subtle interventions are exactly what's needed. In our modern world, where we tend to reach immediately for the strongest solution, we've perhaps lost appreciation for remedies that work quietly and gently over time. The ancient Egyptians understood that healing happens on a spectrum and that different intensities of treatment are appropriate for different situations. Imagine an ancient Egyptian family settling in for the evening. The day's work is done, the sun has set over the Nile, and it's time to rest. But the father is anxious about tomorrow's tasks, and he knows he won't sleep well without help. His wife prepares a simple remedy passed down through generations, lettuce latex dissolved in date wine, sweetened with honey. He drinks it, and gradually his mind quiets. An hour later, he's sleeping peacefully. It's not dramatic. There's no powerful rush of sedation, just a gentle easing into rest. And in the morning, he wakes naturally, refreshed, without the grogginess that many modern sleep aids produce. This is medicine in its most basic and perhaps most wholesome form, gentle help from a plant, allowing the body's natural processes to function as they should. Chapter 5. Aloe Vera, the healing plant of immortality. Have you ever wondered why aloe vera gel is in so many modern cosmetics and health products? The answer might be written in hieroglyphs on temple walls along the Nile. The ancient Egyptians called aloe the plant of immortality, and they valued it so highly that they planted it near the entrances to tombs. When pharaohs died, aloe was among the precious gifts buried with them for use in the afterlife. But was this just superstition and symbolism? Or did the Egyptians understand something real about this unusual succulent plant? Modern science is discovering that the ancients might have been right to treasure aloe, and the reasons go far beyond simple skincare. Aloe vera, scientifically known as Aloe barbadensis Miller, is a succulent plant with thick, fleshy leaves filled with a clear gel. The plant is native to the Arabian Peninsula, but it was cultivated throughout the Mediterranean world in ancient times, including in Egypt. The Egyptians grew aloe in gardens and in pots, ensuring a ready supply of this valuable medicinal plant. The thick leaves were filled with two useful substances: the clear gel from the inner leaf, which was used for healing and soothing, and a yellow latex from just beneath the leaf skin, which was used as a powerful laxative. The earliest written record of aloe vera use comes from, you guessed it, the Ebers Papyrus. This amazing medical document, which we keep coming back to because it's such a treasure trove of Egyptian botanical knowledge, lists aloe in at least 12 different formulas. These prescriptions use aloe for treating burns, wounds, skin infections, and digestive problems. The Egyptians clearly had a sophisticated understanding of aloe's various applications, but the most famous Egyptian and aloe vera is associated with Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Historical accounts suggest that Cleopatra used aloe vera as a central part of her beauty regimen. She apparently applied aloe gel to her skin daily, believing it kept her complexion youthful and radiant. Whether this actually contributed to her legendary beauty is impossible to verify, but it demonstrates that aloe was valued by the elite as a cosmetic as well as a medicine. The connection between aloe and Egyptian funerary practices is fascinating. Aloe was one of the substances used in embalming and mummification. The combination of aloe's antimicrobial properties and its pleasant smell made it valuable for preserving bodies. Some researchers have suggested that aloe might have been mixed with myrrh and other substances to create the embalming fluids that kept Egyptian mummies preserved for thousands of years. Chemical analysis of mummy tissue has detected compounds that could be consistent with aloe, though definitive identification is difficult given the complex mix of substances used in mummification. The symbolic importance of aloe related to its remarkable hardiness. Aloe plants can survive in extremely harsh conditions, going weeks without water, thriving in poor soil, and even continuing to grow when uprooted. To the Egyptians, who were deeply concerned with immortality and eternal life, a plant that seemed nearly impossible to kill must have appeared magical. Planting aloe near tombs was a way of symbolically conferring the plant's vitality to the deceased. Modern science has confirmed many of the Egyptian uses for aloe. The clear gel inside aloe leaves contains over 75 different active compounds, including vitamins, minerals, enzymes, amino acids, and complex polysaccharides. These compounds work together to produce aloe's healing effects. Research has confirmed that aloe gel has anti-inflammatory properties, promotes wound healing, has antimicrobial effects against certain bacteria and fungi, and can soothe irritated skin. A systematic review published in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics in 2018 examined studies of aloe vera's effectiveness for wound healing. The review found evidence that aloe gel can accelerate the healing of first and second-degree burns and may help with certain types of wounds. The mechanism appears to involve increasing collagen production and improving blood flow to injured tissue. This validates the ancient Egyptian use of aloe for treating burns and wounds. The calming properties of aloe relate primarily to its ability to soothe physical discomfort. When you're suffering from a painful burn or irritated skin, relief from that pain has a powerful calming effect on the entire nervous system. The Egyptians understood this connection between physical comfort and mental peace. Several Egyptian medical texts describe treating anxiety and restlessness that resulted from physical ailments, using aloe and other soothing remedies to address the root cause of the psychological distress. Aloe also had internal uses in Egyptian medicine, though these were approached more cautiously. The yellow latex from just beneath the aloe leaf skin contains compounds called anthraquinones, particularly aloin, which is a powerful stimulant laxative. The Egyptians used this for treating constipation and cleansing the digestive system. The Ebers Papyrus includes formulas using aloe latex for various digestive complaints. Modern medicine confirms that aloe latex is indeed an effective laxative, though one that should be used carefully due to potential side effects. There's an interesting connection between digestive health and emotional well-being that the Egyptians seem to have understood. They recognized that digestive discomfort could cause irritability, anxiety, and poor sleep. Modern research into the gut-brain axis, the bidirectional communication between the digestive system and the brain, is confirming these ancient observations. By using aloe and other remedies to improve digestive health, the Egyptians were indirectly improving mental and emotional health as well. The cultivation and processing of aloe required specific knowledge. Aloe plants need to be mature, typically at least 3 to 4 years old, before they produce leaves with optimal gel content and medicinal properties. The Egyptians would have learned through experience which plants were ready to harvest and which should be left to grow longer. Harvesting was done carefully to avoid damaging the plant, cutting outer leaves at the base and allowing the plant to continue growing new leaves from its center. Once harvested, aloe leaves had to be processed quickly. The gel inside the leaves begins to degrade soon after the leaf is cut, losing some of its beneficial properties. The Egyptians would cut open the leaves and scoop out the gel, then use it fresh or mix it with other ingredients to make ointments and salves. For longer-term storage, aloe gel could be dried into a resinous substance that could be reconstituted with water when needed. The spread of aloe cultivation throughout the ancient world is partly due to Egyptian influence. As Egyptian medical knowledge spread to Greece and Rome, aloe came with it. The Greek physician Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century CE, described aloe and its uses in terms clearly influenced by Egyptian sources. He recommended aloe for wounds, ulcers, skin problems, and digestive issues, essentially the same applications the Egyptians had used for thousands of years. Alexander the Great's conquest of Egypt, around 330 BCE, created a direct pipeline for Egyptian knowledge to flow to Greece. There's a famous story, possibly apocryphal, that Aristotle advised Alexander to conquer the island of Socotra, off the Horn of Africa, specifically to secure its supply of aloe, which was needed to treat wounded soldiers. Whether or not this story is true, It illustrates how valuable aloe was considered to be in the ancient world, valuable enough to influence military strategy. The commercialization of aloe in the modern world began in the 1950 seconds, but it represents a rediscovery of something the Egyptians knew 4,000 years ago. Today, aloe vera is a multi-billion-dollar global industry. The gel is used in everything from sunburn remedies to face creams to digestive supplements. Walk down the aisle of any pharmacy or health food store, and you'll find dozens of products featuring aloe. The ancient Egyptians would recognize every single one of these applications because they pioneered them millennia ago. However, there's an important caveat about modern aloe products. The quality varies enormously. Many commercial aloe products contain only small amounts of actual aloe, diluted with water, thickeners, and preservatives. Some have been processed in ways that destroy many of the beneficial compounds. The fresh aloe gel that an ancient Egyptian would have scooped directly from a freshly cut leaf is far more potent than the commercial aloe gel you buy in a bottle. This doesn't mean commercial products are useless, but it does mean that not all aloe is created equal. For people interested in using aloe the way the Egyptians did, growing your own aloe plant is remarkably easy. Aloe plants thrive with minimal care, needing only occasional watering and bright light. When you need aloe gel, you can cut off an outer leaf, slice it open, and scoop out the fresh gel just as the Egyptians did. This gel can be applied directly to minor burns, cuts, sunburns, or irritated skin. It can also be mixed with honey, as the Egyptians often did, to create a soothing ointment with additional antibacterial properties. The Egyptian understanding of aloe extended to knowing what it couldn't do. They didn't claim it was a cure-all or a magical panacea. Instead, they used it for specific, appropriate applications where its properties were genuinely helpful. This represents a rational, empirical approach to botanical medicine. They tried aloe for various conditions, observed what worked and what didn't, and passed down the knowledge of its effective uses. Modern herbalism and evidence-based medicine would benefit from the same careful, observational approach. There's something deeply satisfying about the continuity between ancient Egyptian aloe use and modern practice. When you apply aloe gel to a sunburn today, you're using a remedy that has been continuously employed for thousands of years. The chemical compounds in the gel are the same ones that soothed burns for Egyptian builders working under the scorching desert sun. The plant hasn't changed. The healing hasn't changed. Only our understanding of why it works has deepened. The Egyptian designation of aloe as the plant of immortality turns out to be poetically accurate in an unexpected way. While aloe won't make anyone literally immortal, its knowledge has achieved a kind of immortality, passing from generation to generation across thousands of years and spanning continents and cultures. Today, aloe is cultivated on every inhabited continent. It's used in traditional medicine systems from Mexico to China to Nigeria. And at the root of much of this global aloe knowledge, if you trace back far enough, you'll find those ancient Egyptian herbalists carefully tending their plants along the Nile, discovering through patient observation the healing powers that we still rely on today. Chapter 6. Chamomile, the golden flower of Ra. What flower was so sacred to the ancient Egyptians that they believed it belonged to Ra, the sun god himself? The answer is chamomile, that humble plant with daisy-like flowers that grows wild across much of Egypt and the Mediterranean. To modern people, chamomile is perhaps best known as a gentle tea for promoting sleep and easing anxiety. But to the ancient Egyptians, chamomile was much more than that. It was divine medicine, a gift from the gods, and one of their most versatile calming remedies. The fascinating part is that modern research is confirming that Egyptian reverence for chamomile was well-founded. This unassuming little flower contains powerful compounds that genuinely calm the mind and heal the body. The ancient Egyptian name for chamomile was something like chemi, though the exact pronunciation is uncertain given the limits of our understanding of ancient Egyptian phonetics. What we do know is that chamomile appears repeatedly in Egyptian medical texts, religious writings, and even in tomb paintings. The flowers were offered to the gods in temples, included in funerary arrangements, and prescribed for a wide array of ailments. The Ebers Papyrus mentions chamomile in multiple formulas for treating skin conditions, digestive problems, and nervous tension. Why was chamomile associated with Ra? The answer lies in its appearance. Chamomile flowers have bright yellow centers surrounded by white petals resembling the sun. When fields of chamomile bloom, they create a golden carpet across the landscape, as if the sun itself had spilled onto the earth. The ancient Egyptians, who saw divine significance in natural phenomena, interpreted this as a sign that chamomile carried the essence of the sun god. They believed that consuming or applying chamomile transferred some of Ra's vital energy to the person using it. The actual medicinal uses of chamomile were extensive. For digestive problems, the Egyptians brewed chamomile flowers in hot water to create a soothing tea, exactly as we do today. For skin irritations, they crushed fresh chamomile flowers and applied them directly to the affected area, or they infused the flowers in oil to create a healing ointment. For general anxiety and nervous tension, chamomile was consumed as tea or combined with other calming herbs in more complex formulas. The Egyptians recognized chamomile as a gentle remedy suitable for regular use, unlike more powerful substances like opium that were reserved for severe conditions. Modern chemistry has revealed exactly why chamomile works so well for calming and healing. The flowers contain several important active compounds, the most studied being apigenin, a flavonoid that binds to certain receptors in the brain. Specifically, apigenin acts on benzodiazepine receptors, the same receptors that pharmaceutical anti-anxiety drugs like Valium target. However, apigenin's effect is much gentler than pharmaceutical drugs, providing mild, calming effects without the sedation, impairment, or addiction potential of benzodiazepines. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Clinical Psychopharmacology in 2016 examined chamomile extract as a treatment for generalized anxiety disorder. The study found that participants taking chamomile extract experienced significant reductions in anxiety symptoms compared to placebo, and the benefits were sustained over long-term use. Even more interesting, participants who had been taking chamomile and then stopped were less likely to experience rebound anxiety compared to people stopping pharmaceutical anti-anxiety medications. This suggests that chamomile provides genuine therapeutic benefits without creating dependence. Another study, published in Molecular Medicine Reports in 2010, found that chamomile extract has antidepressant-like effects in animal models, possibly by modulating neurotransmitter systems, including serotonin and norepinephrine. While animal studies don't always translate directly to humans, these findings suggest that the ancient Egyptian use of chamomile for mood and emotional problems had a solid pharmacological basis. The anti-inflammatory properties of chamomile were also well utilized by the Egyptians. They used chamomile preparations for treating inflamed skin, wounds that weren't healing properly, and various inflammatory conditions. Modern research confirms that chamomile contains multiple anti-inflammatory compounds, including alpha-bisabolol and chamazoline. These compounds reduce inflammation through several mechanisms, including inhibiting pro-inflammatory enzymes and modulating immune responses. One particularly Egyptian use of chamomile was in embalming, though not as prominently as myrrh or aloe. Chemical analysis of mummified remains has occasionally detected compounds consistent with chamomile, suggesting it was sometimes included in the complex mixtures used to preserve bodies. The antimicrobial and preservative properties of chamomile would have made it useful for this purpose, while its solar associations made it symbolically appropriate for helping the deceased on their journey through the underworld. Chamomile was grown extensively throughout Egypt. It grows wild in many areas, but the Egyptians also cultivated it in gardens to ensure a reliable supply. The plants are hardy and undemanding, thriving in Egypt's climate with minimal irrigation. Harvest typically occurred when the flowers were fully open, as this is when the concentration of active compounds is highest. The flowers could be used fresh or dried for storage. Properly dried chamomile flowers retain their medicinal properties for months, making it practical to maintain year-round supplies. The preparation methods for chamomile were simple but effective. For tea, a handful of dried flowers would be placed in hot water and allowed to steep for several minutes, creating a golden infusion with a pleasant apple-like aroma. The word chamomile actually comes from Greek words meaning ground apple, referring to this characteristic scent. For topical use, chamomile flowers might be crushed with a mortar and pestle and mixed with honey, oil, or other carrier substances to create salves and ointments. Chamomile was also combined with other calming plants. Egyptian formulas often mixed chamomile with blue lotus, lettuce extract, or other sedative herbs to create more potent preparations. This shows sophisticated understanding of herbal synergy. Modern herbalists recognize that combining plants with complementary actions often produces better results than using single plants in isolation, and the ancient Egyptians had figured this out through careful experimentation thousands of years ago. For children, chamomile was considered especially appropriate. Its gentle action and pleasant taste made it suitable for pediatric use in ways that more powerful medicines were not. Egyptian mothers would give chamomile tea to fussy children to help them calm down and sleep. This practice continued through Greek and Roman times and into medieval Europe, and it remains common today. When modern parents give chamomile tea to a restless child, they're following a practice that extends back at least 4,000 years. The use of chamomile extended beyond medicine into daily life and ritual. Chamomile was sometimes scattered on floors in homes and temples, where footsteps would crush the flowers and release their pleasant fragrance. This served both practical purposes, making spaces smell nice and possibly providing mild insect repellent effects, and ritual purposes, purifying space and invoking solar blessing. Imagine walking through an Egyptian temple with crushed chamomile flowers beneath your feet, the air filled with their apple-like scent, sunlight streaming through high windows. It would have been a multi-sensory experience, designed to induce a state of calm reverence. The spread of chamomile use from Egypt throughout the ancient and medieval world is well documented. Greek physicians learned about chamomile from Egyptian sources and adopted it enthusiastically. Hippocrates prescribed it for fevers and women's diseases. Dioscorides recommended it for a wide variety of conditions. The Romans spread chamomile cultivation throughout their empire, bringing it to Britain and other northern regions, where it naturalized and became a staple of European folk medicine. In medieval Europe, chamomile became one of the most commonly grown medicinal herbs. Monastery gardens almost always included chamomile, and it was prescribed by monks for everything from anxiety to digestive troubles to skin problems, exactly the same uses the Egyptians had pioneered. The Anglo-Saxons considered chamomile one of their 9 sacred herbs. This represents an unbroken chain of knowledge, stretching from ancient Egypt through Greece and Rome to medieval Europe, and ultimately to modern herbalism. Today, chamomile is one of the most scientifically studied medicinal herbs, and the research consistently validates traditional uses. Studies have confirmed its effectiveness for anxiety as a mild sleep aid, for digestive problems including irritable bowel syndrome, for skin irritation and inflammation, and even for conditions like eczema and wound healing. The ancient Egyptians, working entirely from careful observation without any of our modern analytical tools, managed to identify nearly all the conditions that modern research now confirms chamomile can help with. The safety profile of chamomile is excellent. Unlike pharmaceutical anti-anxiety drugs or sleep aids, chamomile has virtually no risk of dependence, no significant side effects in normal use, and can be taken long-term without problems. The Egyptians recognized this. They used chamomile freely, without the caution they applied to more powerful substances like opium. It was a medicine for everyday use, accessible to everyone from pharaohs to peasants. There is one caution worth mentioning. People with allergies to plants in the Asteraceae family, which includes ragweed, chrysanthemums, and marigolds, may also react to chamomile. This is relatively rare but worth knowing. The ancient Egyptians probably observed occasional allergic reactions to chamomile and would have avoided using it for those individuals, though they wouldn't have understood the concept of botanical family relationships that explains why some people react to multiple related plants. The experience of drinking chamomile tea is inherently calming in ways that go beyond chemistry. The ritual of preparing tea, the warm cup in your hands, the pleasant aroma, the act of sitting quietly while drinking, all contribute to the calming effect. The Egyptians understood this holistic aspect of healing. They didn't separate the chemical effects of a plant from the ritual and experiential context of its use. Modern medicine is rediscovering this truth. Studies on the placebo effect and on mind-body medicine show that healing involves much more than just delivering active compounds to target receptors. The entire experience matters. When you drink chamomile tea for stress or anxiety, you're participating in a practice that connects you to countless generations of humans, stretching back to ancient Egypt and beyond. The same plant compounds that calm your nervous system calmed the nerves of an Egyptian scribe, worried about his work, a Greek soldier before battle, a medieval monk seeking contemplative peace, your own grandmother perhaps. There's something profound in that continuity, a reminder that despite all our modern complexity, we share the same basic human needs for calm, comfort, and peace that our ancestors felt. And sometimes, the simplest remedies, a flower, hot water, a quiet moment, are still the best. Chapter 7. Coriander, the Spice of Serenity. Did you know that one of the world's oldest cultivated plants was grown in ancient Egypt, not just for flavoring food, but as a powerful medicine for calming the mind and settling the stomach? Coriander, the seeds of the plant we call cilantro when we use its leaves, has been part of human civilization for at least 7,000 years. When archaeologists opened ancient Egyptian tombs, they found coriander seeds placed there as offerings and provisions for the afterlife. The question is, why did the Egyptians value this unassuming seed so highly, and what did they know about its calming properties that we've forgotten? The ancient Egyptians called coriander kaushat, or something phonetically similar, and they cultivated it extensively throughout the Nile Valley. Coriander plants are relatively easy to grow, thriving in Egypt's climate and producing abundant seeds. These small, round beige seeds have a warm, slightly citrusy aroma and a complex flavor that made them valuable as a spice. But the Egyptians quickly discovered that coriander offered more than just culinary benefits. The seeds had medicinal properties that made them valuable for treating various ailments, particularly those related to digestion and nervous tension. The Ebers Papyrus, that invaluable source that keeps reappearing in our story, includes coriander in numerous medicinal formulas. It's prescribed for digestive complaints, particularly for what the Egyptians described as stomach pain and intestinal discomfort. It's included in formulas for headaches, possibly because the Egyptians recognized that many headaches stem from digestive problems. And interestingly, coriander appears in some formulas described as treatments for anxiety and excessive worrying, suggesting the Egyptians had observed its mild calming effects. Modern science is confirming the Egyptian understanding of coriander. The seeds contain a variety of active compounds, including linalool, which is the same compound that gives lavender much of its calming aroma. Studies have shown that linalool has anxiolytic or anti-anxiety properties. It appears to work by modulating neurotransmitter systems in the brain, particularly GABA, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter that calms neural activity. When you smell or consume coriander, you're exposing yourself to compounds that genuinely have calming effects on the nervous system. A study published in the Indian Journal of Pharmacology in 2009 tested coriander seed extract in animal models of anxiety and found significant anti-anxiety effects comparable to diazepam, a common pharmaceutical anti-anxiety drug, though at higher doses. Another study in the journal Food and Chemical Toxicology in 2011 found that coriander extract had both anti-anxiety and antidepressant-like effects in animal tests. While animal studies don't always translate directly to humans, they provide compelling evidence that the traditional use of coriander for calming purposes has a real pharmacological basis. The digestive benefits of coriander are even better established. The seeds have carminative properties, meaning they help expel gas from the digestive tract and reduce bloating and discomfort. They also stimulate digestive enzymes, helping the body break down food more efficiently. For anyone who has experienced the anxiety that accompanies severe digestive discomfort, the connection between coriander's digestive benefits and its calming effects becomes clear. By settling the stomach, coriander indirectly calms the mind. The ancient Egyptians prepared coriander in several ways. The most common was to grind the dried seeds into powder, which could then be mixed with food, dissolved in wine or beer, or combined with other herbs in medicinal formulas. Whole coriander seeds were also used, either chewed directly or brewed into tea. The Egyptians discovered that slightly crushing the seeds before brewing released more of the aromatic oils and strengthened the medicinal effect, a technique that herbalists still use today. Coriander was also used in bread making, both for flavor and for its digestive benefits. Ancient Egyptian bread was often coarse and could be hard on the digestive system. Adding coriander to the dough not only improved the taste, but made the bread easier to digest and less likely to cause stomach upset. Workers building the pyramids, who relied heavily on bread rations, would have benefited from this simple addition that made their basic food both more palatable and more digestible. The presence of coriander in tombs is particularly interesting. At Tutankhamun's tomb, archaeologists found a container with coriander seeds among the many provisions left for the young pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. This wasn't unique to royal burials. Excavations of non-royal tombs have also found coriander, suggesting it was considered an essential provision for the deceased. The Egyptians believed the dead would need to eat in the afterlife, and coriander was important enough to include in that eternal food supply. But coriander in tombs may have had another purpose beyond simple provision. The seeds have mild antimicrobial properties and a pleasant aroma that could help mask the smell of decay. Some researchers have suggested that coriander might have been included in tomb offerings, partly for these practical benefits, helping to preserve other organic materials and improve the atmosphere in sealed burial chambers. The cultivation of coriander in ancient Egypt was straightforward but required some knowledge. The plants grow best when temperatures are moderate, so planting typically happened in late autumn or winter to avoid the hottest months. The plants produce feathery leaves, which we call cilantro today, and then send up flowering stalks. After the flowers are pollinated, seed pods develop containing the coriander seeds. Harvest occurs when the seeds turn from green to beige and begin to dry, at which point the entire plant is cut and the seeds are threshed out. Egyptian farmers would have saved seeds from their best plants each year, gradually developing varieties adapted to local conditions. This practice, carried out over generations, created coriander strains particularly suited to Egyptian cultivation. Some of these ancient varieties may still exist in heirloom seeds passed down through traditional farming communities in Egypt and neighbouring regions, though genetic testing would be needed to trace their actual ancestry. Coriander oil, extracted from the seeds, was another Egyptian preparation, though it was more labor-intensive to produce and therefore more expensive. The oil concentrated the seeds' aromatic and medicinal compounds, making it very potent. A few drops of coriander oil could be mixed with carrier oils and applied to the temples for headache relief, or a drop could be taken in wine for digestive distress. The production of plant oils required special presses and considerable quantities of seeds, so this was typically done by specialists rather than in individual households. The combination of coriander with other spices and herbs was common in Egyptian medicine. Coriander was often mixed with cumin, another digestive aid that the Egyptians cultivated extensively. Together, these two spices created a powerful formula for digestive health. They were also sometimes combined with honey to create a medicinal paste that could be taken for stomach problems or mixed into warm water to make a soothing drink. The spread of coriander throughout the ancient world was facilitated by its seeds, which store and transport easily. Egyptian trade brought coriander to many regions, though the plant was also cultivated independently in other parts of the world. The ancient Hebrews knew coriander. The biblical book of Exodus compares manna to coriander seed. The Greeks and Romans adopted coriander enthusiastically, using it in both cooking and medicine much as the Egyptians had. In Ayurvedic medicine, the traditional healing system of India, coriander is classified as a cooling herb that reduces pitta, the dosha associated with heat and intensity. It's used for digestive problems, inflammation, and stress. In traditional Chinese medicine, coriander seeds are considered to have aromatic and digestive regulating properties. The fact that multiple ancient medical systems developed independently came to similar conclusions about coriander's uses suggests these effects are real and observable, not just cultural constructs. Modern use of coriander for calming purposes has largely been forgotten in Western herbalism, though it remains valued for digestive health. However, as interest grows in traditional medicines and as research confirms the anxiolytic properties of compounds in coriander, we may see a revival of this ancient Egyptian application. Already, some herbalists are recommending coriander for people whose anxiety manifests primarily through digestive symptoms, a combination problem that coriander is particularly well suited to address. Growing your own coriander is easy and gives you access to both the fresh leaves and the seeds. The plant is annual, meaning it completes its life cycle in one season, and it will readily self-seed if allowed to, providing a continuous supply year after year. Fresh coriander leaves have a different flavor and different medicinal properties than the seeds. They're particularly rich in antioxidants and have their own digestive benefits. Having both available means you can use the whole plant, just as the ancient Egyptians did. The Egyptian experience with coriander highlights an important principle of traditional medicine. Foods and medicines aren't entirely separate categories. Coriander is both a flavorful spice that improves meals and a gentle medicine that promotes health. This integration of nutrition and healing is something modern Western culture has largely lost, with food in one category and medicine in a completely separate category. The Egyptians, and indeed most traditional cultures, didn't make such sharp distinctions. The best meals were those that both tasted good and promoted health. When you cook with coriander today, you're working with the same plant that flavored meals and healed ailments in ancient Egypt 4,000 years ago. The seeds you grind in your spice mill could be direct descendants, through countless generations, of the coriander cultivated in gardens along the Nile. The aromatic compounds that please your sense of smell are the same ones that calmed Egyptian minds and settled Egyptian stomachs. It's a beautiful example of living continuity with the ancient past, hidden in plain sight in your spice cabinet. Chapter 8. The Sacred Grove. Gardens of Peace in Ancient Egypt. What was it like to walk through an ancient Egyptian garden, surrounded by carefully cultivated calming plants? the air heavy with the scent of frankincense and chamomile, the sound of water trickling through irrigation channels, the sight of blue lotus flowers opening to greet the morning sun. Gardens in ancient Egypt were more than just decorative spaces or sources of food. They were sacred places, healing places, places deliberately designed to bring peace to troubled minds and restore balance to the soul. In this final chapter, we'll explore how the Egyptians brought all their knowledge of calming plants together into integrated gardens that served as ancient wellness centers, and what lessons these spaces might hold for our stress-filled modern world. The concept of the garden was deeply important in ancient Egyptian culture. In a civilization surrounded by desert, green growing things represented life itself. The Egyptian word for garden, hetep, is the same word used for offerings to the gods and for the concept of peace and satisfaction. This linguistic connection reveals how Egyptians thought about gardens. They were places that created hetep in all its meanings. They offered beauty to deities and humans alike, and they generated a profound sense of peace and well-being. Archaeological evidence for Egyptian gardens comes from multiple sources. Tomb paintings frequently depict gardens, showing their layout and the types of plants grown. These weren't just artistic flourishes. Gardens were so important to the Egyptian sense of well-being that people wanted to ensure they would have access to gardens in the afterlife. Actual remains of ancient gardens have been excavated at various sites, including the workers' village at Deir el-Medina and at the palace complexes of various pharaohs. These excavations reveal sophisticated irrigation systems, carefully planned layouts, and evidence of diverse plant cultivation. The typical design of an Egyptian garden integrated practicality with symbolism. Gardens were usually rectangular, enclosed by walls that provided protection from desert winds and created private space. Within the walls, the garden was organized around a central water feature, typically a rectangular pool or series of pools. This wasn't just for irrigation, though water distribution was certainly important. The pools themselves were symbolic, representing the primordial waters of none from which all creation emerged. They also provided habitat for fish and water plants, including the sacred blue lotus. Trees were planted around the perimeter and throughout the garden, providing shade in Egypt's intense heat. Date palms were common, offering both shade and valuable fruit. Sycamore figs were also popular, considered sacred to several goddesses including Hathor and Nut. The Egyptians believed that sitting under a sycamore fig tree brought divine blessing and comfort. Tamarisk trees, with their feathery foliage and ability to thrive in salty soil, were also cultivated. Each of these trees had practical benefits, but also spiritual associations that added layers of meaning to the garden space. Between the trees and around the pools, Egyptians planted the calming herbs and flowers we've been exploring throughout this story. Blue lotus in the pools, their flowers opening each morning in a daily miracle. Chamomile creating golden carpets of blooms. Coriander with its feathery leaves and eventual seed production. Lettuce allowed to grow tall and produce its medicinal latex. Aloe in pots or planted directly in well-drained spots. Frankincense and myrrh, more challenging to grow in Egypt proper but cultivated where possible, particularly in temple gardens that had resources for specialized horticulture. The sensory experience of such a garden must have been remarkable. Imagine stepping out of the glaring desert sun into the shaded, cool environment of a well-maintained garden. The temperature immediately drops. The harsh, dry air becomes humid and plant-scented. Water makes gentle sounds as it flows through irrigation channels. Birds sing from the tree branches, drawn to this oasis in the desert. The visual assault of bright sun on sand is replaced by restful green foliage and colourful flowers. Every sense is engaged, and every sensation promotes relaxation and peace. Temple gardens were particularly elaborate. Major temples maintained extensive gardens that served multiple purposes. They provided flowers and herbs for religious offerings and ceremonies. They produced incense materials and medicinal plants, and they created contemplative spaces where priests could prepare mentally and spiritually for their sacred duties. The temple complex at Karnak included multiple gardens, some designed for specific plants needed for particular rituals, others serving as general sacred groves. The gardens at Karnak included specialized pools for Blue Lotus cultivation, as we mentioned earlier, but they also had gardens dedicated to growing the plants needed for incense production. Imagine teams of priests and workers tending these sacred groves, harvesting frankincense, resin, or gathering chamomile flowers, their work itself a form of devotion. The connection between horticulture and spirituality was seamless in Egyptian culture. Growing healing plants was holy work. Palace gardens served different but equally important functions. For the pharaoh and the royal family, gardens provided private space for relaxation, away from the intense demands of governance and court life. We have records of pharaohs taking walks in their gardens, sometimes accompanied by family or advisors, sometimes alone. The garden was a place where even the most powerful person in Egypt could find respite and peace. Cleopatra's palace in Alexandria was famous for its extensive gardens, which reportedly included rare plants from throughout the known world, a botanical collection that served both practical and prestige purposes. Wealthy private citizens also maintained gardens when they could afford to. A successful merchant, a high-ranking scribe, a prosperous artisan, any Egyptian who had sufficient resources would invest in creating a garden. For people whose daily lives involved stress, whether from business concerns, administrative responsibilities, or physical labor, having a private garden provided essential restoration. The investment in walls, irrigation, plants, and ongoing maintenance was considerable, but Egyptians considered it worthwhile for the peace and beauty it provided. Even people of modest means found ways to access gardens. Community gardens existed in some areas, where multiple families might share the work and the benefits. Temple gardens, while primarily serving religious functions, were sometimes open to the public on certain days or for people seeking healing. And the natural vegetation along the Nile, particularly in the Delta region, provided accessible green space where people could escape the built environment. The therapeutic use of garden spaces was deliberate and sophisticated. Egyptian physicians would prescribe time in gardens as part of treatment for various ailments, particularly those related to stress and mental health. A person suffering from anxiety, depression, or exhaustion might be instructed to spend time daily in a garden, breathing the scented air, sitting by water, absorbing the peaceful atmosphere. This was medicine. As much as any herbal preparation, and modern research into ecotherapy and the health benefits of nature exposure is confirming that the Egyptians were absolutely right. Studies over the past few decades have demonstrated that exposure to nature and green spaces has measurable health benefits. Time in nature lowers cortisol levels, the stress hormone. It reduces blood pressure and heart rate. It improves mood and cognitive function. It even enhances immune system function. Simply looking at plants and natural scenes has beneficial effects. The Egyptians understood all of this experientially, without needing scientific studies to confirm it. They observed that people felt better after spending time in gardens, and they integrated garden time into their approach to health and healing. The concept of the healing garden has ancient Egyptian roots, but continues to evolve today. Hospitals and healthcare facilities increasingly include gardens in their designs, recognizing that access to nature supports healing. These modern healing gardens often include many of the same elements Egyptian gardens did. Water features, diverse plantings including aromatic and medicinal herbs, seating areas that encourage contemplation, and designs that engage multiple senses. We've come full circle, rediscovering through scientific research what the Egyptians knew through careful observation thousands of years ago. Garden maintenance in ancient Egypt was labor-intensive. Without modern tools or automated irrigation, keeping a garden alive in the desert required constant attention. Water had to be brought from the Nile or from wells, carried in jars or channeled through carefully maintained irrigation ditches. Plants had to be tended, pruned, protected from pests. But Egyptians considered this work worthwhile. Tomb inscriptions sometimes mention the gardens a person created during their life, listed as achievements alongside professional accomplishments and family legacy. Creating and maintaining a beautiful garden was respected work that left a lasting positive impact. The spiritual dimension of Egyptian gardens went beyond just the religious associations of particular plants. Gardens themselves were seen as microcosms of cosmic order. In Egyptian theology, the universe was originally perfect order, symbolized as a beautiful garden before chaos and disorder entered. By creating ordered, beautiful gardens, humans were participating in the divine work of maintaining ma'at, cosmic order, and harmony. Working in a garden wasn't just personally therapeutic, it was cosmically significant. This spiritual understanding added another layer to the calming effect of gardens. When an Egyptian walked through their garden, they weren't just enjoying pretty plants and pleasant scents. They were walking through a physical manifestation of cosmic order. They were temporarily stepping out of the chaotic mortal world and into a space that reflected divine perfection. This belief amplified the psychological benefits of the garden, making it not just a peaceful place but a sacred one. The decline of ancient Egyptian garden culture followed the decline of Egyptian civilization itself. As Egypt was conquered successively by Persians, Greeks, Romans, and eventually Arabs, Egyptian cultural practices were gradually supplanted or transformed. The elaborate temple gardens fell into disrepair as temples were closed or converted to other uses. Private gardens became less distinctively Egyptian and more influenced by Greek, Roman, or Islamic garden traditions. The specific Egyptian knowledge about healing plants and garden design was partially lost, though elements of it survived in modified forms. However, the influence of Egyptian gardens extended far beyond Egypt. The Greeks and Romans learned from Egyptian garden design and plant use. The concept of the paradise garden in Persian and later Islamic culture may have been influenced by contact with Egyptian gardens. The European monastery garden tradition, which preserved much botanical and medical knowledge through the Middle Ages, ultimately traces back partly to Egyptian sources via Greek and Roman intermediaries. The healing gardens we're creating today owe debts to ancient Egypt that most people don't realize. What would it take to create an authentic Egyptian-style healing garden today? The basic principles are straightforward, even if exact replication is impossible. Start with enclosed space that creates separation from the outside world. Include water, whether a pool, a fountain, or just a bird bath. Water is essential. Plant a diversity of species, including trees for shade, flowers for beauty and scent, and herbs for medicine. Include aromatic plants like lavender or rosemary if you can't get frankincense, and culinary herbs like modern coriander and chamomile that the Egyptians also used. Create places to sit quietly and absorb the atmosphere. Engage all the senses: sight, sound, smell, touch, even taste if you're growing edible plants. The deeper principle, though, is intention. Egyptian gardens were created with the specific purpose of generating peace, healing, and connection to the divine. They were deliberate acts of creation meant to combat chaos and disorder. If you're creating a garden for healing and calm, that intention should guide every decision. Choose plants not just for their appearance, but for their beneficial properties. Design spaces that invite contemplation rather than activity. Create a place that feels removed from ordinary life, a sanctuary where different rules apply and peace is possible. In our modern world of concrete and screens, of constant digital connectivity and relentless demands on our attention, we need Egyptian gardens, perhaps more than the Egyptians themselves did. We need spaces that reconnect us to living things, that engage our senses in wholesome ways, that remind us that we're biological beings evolved to live in relationship with plants and earth and water. We need permission and encouragement to step away from productivity and simply be in peaceful space. The ancient Egyptians left us an incredible legacy in their knowledge of calming plants. From the blue lotus that opened consciousness to frankincense that carried prayers, from humble lettuce that eased into sleep to coriander that settled the stomach, from aloe that healed burns to chamomile that calmed anxiety, they discovered through patient observation how plants could reduce human suffering and promote peace. They combined this botanical knowledge with sophisticated garden design to create spaces that integrated all these healing influences into holistic environments. But perhaps their greatest gift to us isn't any particular plant or garden design. It's the understanding that health and peace come from our relationship with the natural world, that healing involves the whole person in their whole environment, and that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply sitting quietly in a garden, surrounded by growing things, breathing scented air, listening to water, feeling sunlight and shade, reconnecting to the rhythms and textures of life that our ancestors knew intimately. This is wisdom we desperately need to reclaim. 4,000 years have passed since Egyptian physicians first wrote down their knowledge of healing plants on papyrus scrolls. Empires have risen and fallen. Languages have died and been reborn. Technologies beyond the wildest dreams of the ancients have been invented. Yet here we are, rediscovering that chamomile calms anxiety, that aloe heals burns, that gardens promote peace. The plants haven't changed. The human need for healing and calm hasn't changed. Perhaps it's time we recognize that in this arena, at least, the ancient Egyptians had already figured out most of what we need to know. Our task now is to honor their wisdom by putting it into practice in our own lives and our own gardens, creating our own sacred groves where peace can grow. The story of Egypt's calming plants is ultimately a story about paying attention to the natural world, about observing carefully what works and passing that knowledge down through generations, about creating beauty and healing in the midst of harsh environments. It's a story about human ingenuity and wisdom, operating without modern technology or scientific understanding, yet arriving at genuine truths about healing. And it's a story that continues today. Every time someone drinks chamomile tea for stress, applies aloe to a burn, smells lavender to calm down, or simply sits quietly in a garden feeling their nervous system settle and their breathing slow. The pharaohs are gone. The temples are ruins. The priests no longer perform their rituals, but the plants remain, still growing, still offering their gifts of calm and healing to anyone wise enough to pay attention. In that sense, the ancient Egyptians achieved a kind of immortality they perhaps didn't expect. Their garden knowledge, their plant wisdom, their understanding of how green growing things can heal human suffering. This legacy is truly eternal, more lasting than the pyramids, more valuable than gold. Every garden is a testament to their wisdom. Every healing is a vindication of their knowledge. Every moment of peace found among plants is a connection stretching back thousands of years to those first careful observers along the Nile who began the work of understanding how nature heals. So tonight, wherever you are in the world, perhaps brew yourself a cup of chamomile tea, or step outside to smell the night-blooming flowers, or simply sit for a moment and imagine those ancient gardens along the Nile, pools reflecting stars, lotus flowers closed until dawn, the scent of frankincense drifting on the warm air, the eternal flow of the river in the distance. You're connected to all of that through the plants, through the knowledge, through the simple human need for peace that transcends all time and distance. The Pharaoh's gardens of calm are not lost. They exist wherever we choose to cultivate them, in our yards, in our pots, in our awareness of the healing power that plants offer. The wisdom of ancient Egypt is available to anyone who reaches for it. All you have to do is plant a seed, tend it with care, and wait for the peace to grow. Chapter 9. Cumin, the ancient Egyptian digestive comfort herb. Have you ever had that gnawing anxiety that comes from an upset stomach, where your gut and your mind feed off each other in an endless cycle of discomfort? The ancient Egyptians understood this connection between digestive health and mental calm better than almost any ancient culture. That's why cumin, a small, unassuming seed that we often overlook today, was one of their most treasured medicinal plants. This wasn't just about treating belly aches. The Egyptians recognized that when your digestive system is settled and comfortable, your entire being becomes calmer and more peaceful. And cumin was their go-to remedy for achieving that state. Cumin, scientifically known as Cuminum ciminum, is native to the eastern Mediterranean and was cultivated throughout ancient Egypt from the very earliest dynasties. Archaeological excavations have found cumin seeds at sites dating back to 3000 BCE, making it one of the oldest cultivated spice plants in human history. The ancient Egyptian name for cumin was something like tepnen or kamun, and it appears frequently in medical papyri, religious texts, and even in agricultural tax records, which tells us it was valuable enough to be taxed as a commodity. The Ebers Papyrus mentions cumin in at least 40 different medicinal formulas, more than almost any other single plant except perhaps honey. These prescriptions use cumin for digestive complaints of all kinds, including stomach pain, intestinal gas, bloating, constipation, and what the Egyptians called heat in the belly, probably some form of inflammatory digestive condition. But cumin also appears in formulas for headaches, general malaise, and interestingly, for calming nervousness and anxiety. The Egyptians had observed what modern medicine is now confirming, that digestive discomfort and mental distress are intimately connected. Modern scientific research has validated the Egyptian use of cumin as a digestive aid. The seeds contain compounds including cuminaldehyde, which gives cumin its distinctive aroma, along with various terpenes, flavonoids, and essential oils. These compounds stimulate the production of digestive enzymes, helping the body break down food more efficiently. They also have carminative properties, meaning they help expel gas from the digestive tract and reduce bloating. A study published in Middle East Journal of Digestive Diseases in 2013 found that cumin extract significantly improved symptoms in patients with irritable bowel syndrome, including reducing pain, bloating, and digestive irregularity. The connection between cumin and anxiety reduction works through several pathways. First, by relieving digestive discomfort, cumin removes a source of physical stress that triggers anxiety. If you've ever experienced severe digestive problems, you know how anxiety-producing they can be. Second, cumin contains compounds that may have direct effects on the nervous system. Research published in Pharmacognosy magazine in 2011 found that cumin extracts had anti-anxiety effects in animal models, comparable to pharmaceutical anti-anxiety drugs, but without the sedation or side effects. The exact mechanism isn't fully understood, but it appears to involve modulation of neurotransmitter systems in the brain. How did the ancient Egyptians use cumin? The most common preparation was simply grinding the dried seeds into powder and adding the powder to food or mixing it into drinks. Cumin was a standard spice in Egyptian cooking, used in bread, stews, and various other dishes. This meant that Egyptians were getting regular small doses of cumin's beneficial compounds through their normal diet, a perfect example of food as medicine. For more acute digestive problems, higher doses of cumin would be prepared as medicinal teas or mixed with other herbs into therapeutic formulas. Cumin tea was made by crushing the seeds slightly to release their oils, then steeping them in hot water for several minutes. The resulting drink has a warm, earthy, slightly bitter taste that many people find pleasant, especially when sweetened with honey, as the Egyptians often did. This tea would be consumed before or after meals to aid digestion, or whenever digestive discomfort arose. The warmth of the liquid itself also contributed to the soothing effect, relaxing the smooth muscles of the digestive tract. In combination with coriander, which we discussed earlier, cumin formed what was perhaps ancient Egypt's most important digestive remedy. These two spices together, often with the addition of fennel or anise, created a powerful formula for digestive health that's still used in traditional medicine systems around the world today. The Egyptians mixed ground cumin and coriander with honey to create a medicinal paste that could be taken by the spoonful or dissolved in warm water or wine. This combination addresses digestive problems from multiple angles: cumin stimulating enzyme production and relieving gas, coriander settling the stomach and reducing inflammation, honey providing antimicrobial properties and soothing irritated tissues. The cultivation of cumin in ancient Egypt required some skill. The plants are annual herbs that grow to about 1 to 2 feet tall, with delicate divided leaves and small white or pink flowers. The seeds, which are actually the dried fruits of the plant, develop after flowering and must be harvested at just the right time, when they've matured enough to have developed their aromatic compounds, but before they've dried so much that they shatter and fall from the plant. Egyptian farmers learned to watch for the moment when the seed heads had turned from green to brownish, but before they'd fully dried, then they'd cut the whole plants and hang them in bundles to finish drying, catching any seeds that fell. Cumin seeds were valuable enough that they were stored carefully and used economically. Archaeological evidence from storage jars shows that cumin was kept in sealed containers to preserve its aromatic oils and prevent insect damage. The seeds remained potent for months or even years when stored properly, which made cumin an ideal trade commodity. Egyptian cumin was exported throughout the Mediterranean world, bringing wealth to farmers and merchants while spreading Egyptian agricultural and medicinal knowledge to other cultures. The symbolic and religious significance of cumin in ancient Egypt is less prominent than that of plants like Blue Lotus or frankincense, but it still played a role in ritual life. Cumin was included in some food offerings to the gods and to the deceased. Several tombs contain evidence of cumin seeds among the provisions left for the afterlife journey. The practical Egyptian mindset is evident here. They wanted to ensure the deceased had access to good food and effective medicine in the next world, and cumin qualified as both. There's an interesting biblical connection to Egyptian cumin cultivation. The Hebrew Bible mentions cumin several times, always in ways that suggest it was a valued crop. The Israelites, who according to biblical narrative spent time in Egypt and later maintained trade relationships with Egypt, clearly learned cumin cultivation and use from the Egyptians. The prophet Isaiah mentions cumin cultivation techniques that match archaeological evidence from Egypt, including threshing methods and careful harvesting practices. This represents another thread in the vast web of Egyptian agricultural and medicinal knowledge spreading throughout the ancient world. The Greek physician Hippocrates, often called the father of Western medicine, prescribed cumin for digestive ailments in ways clearly influenced by Egyptian practice. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder described cumin as the best remedy for stomach problems and noted that Egyptian cumin was considered the highest quality. This premium status of Egyptian cumin in the ancient world parallels how certain regions today are recognized for producing the best versions of particular crops. The Egyptians had perfected cumin cultivation through millennia of experience, and the quality of their product reflected that expertise. Modern cultivation of cumin has spread worldwide, with major production now in India, Iran, Turkey, and other countries. But the fundamental practices remain similar to what the ancient Egyptians developed. Cumin still requires careful attention during cultivation, precise timing of harvest, and proper processing and storage to maintain quality. The seeds you buy in a grocery store today are the same species, containing the same active compounds that Egyptian farmers were growing 5,000 years ago. When you add cumin to your cooking, you're working with a plant that has an unbroken history of human cultivation stretching back to the very beginning of agriculture. The use of cumin in traditional medicine systems worldwide is a testament to Egyptian influence and to the genuine effectiveness of this humble seed. Ayurvedic medicine classifies cumin as heating and digestive, using it for similar purposes the Egyptians did. Traditional Chinese medicine employs cumin for digestive, cold, and stagnation. Middle Eastern, North African, and Mediterranean herbal traditions all feature cumin prominently as a digestive aid and general tonic. These independent confirmations across diverse medical systems strongly suggest that cumin's benefits are real and observable, not just cultural constructs. Contemporary research continues to uncover new potential benefits of cumin. Studies have found that cumin may help regulate blood sugar levels, potentially beneficial for diabetes prevention and management. Research has identified antioxidant compounds in cumin that may help protect against cellular damage and aging. Some studies suggest cumin may have antimicrobial properties effective against certain harmful bacteria. While the ancient Egyptians didn't understand these mechanisms, they understood the practical result that cumin was a plant that promoted health and well-being in multiple ways. For modern people dealing with the digestive consequences of stress, processed foods, and irregular eating habits, cumin offers a gentle, natural remedy that's been tested by thousands of years of human use. Unlike harsh pharmaceutical laxatives or antacids that can disrupt natural digestive function, cumin works with the body's own processes, supporting and enhancing normal digestion rather than forcing it. This aligns with a growing movement toward natural, functional approaches to digestive health that recognize the importance of supporting the body's innate healing capabilities. The Egyptian understanding that digestive health and mental calm are connected is being validated by modern research into the gut-brain axis. We now know that the digestive system contains millions of neurons, sometimes called the second brain, and produces a large proportion of the body's serotonin, a neurotransmitter crucial for mood regulation. The gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in our intestines, communicates constantly with the brain and influences everything from mood to immune function to cognitive performance. When you improve digestive health with remedies like cumin, you're not just settling your stomach, you're positively influencing this entire complex system that affects mental and emotional well-being. Imagine an ancient Egyptian merchant anxious about a business deal, his stomach tied in knots, his mind racing with worries. He prepares a cup of cumin tea, perhaps adding some honey and a bit of coriander. He sits quietly while the tea steeps, the warm, earthy aroma already beginning to calm him. He drinks slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his belly. Within minutes, the tight cramping in his gut begins to ease. The gas and bloating that had been making him miserable start to dissipate. As his physical discomfort fades, his mental anxiety lessens too. His breathing deepens and slows. His racing thoughts begin to settle. He can think more clearly about his business concerns and realize that most of his worries were exaggerated. This is cumin's gift, not just digestive relief, but the mental peace that follows physical comfort. The ancient Egyptians understood this completely, and we're only now rediscovering what they knew. Chapter 10. Peppermint and its ancient Egyptian cousins. What if I told you that the refreshing mint tea enjoyed throughout Egypt and the Middle East today has roots that extend back to the time of the pharaohs? While the exact species of mint cultivated in ancient Egypt may have differed from modern peppermint, the Egyptians definitely knew and used various mint family plants for their calming and digestive properties. These aromatic herbs, with their cool, refreshing flavor and their powerful medicinal effects, were treasured in ancient Egypt, just as they are throughout the region today. The story of mint in Egypt is a story of continuity, of knowledge passed down through countless generations, still living and relevant thousands of years later. The ancient Egyptian medical papyri mentions several plants that scholars believe were species of mint or closely related herbs in the Lamiaceae family. The exact botanical identification is challenging because ancient Egyptian plant names don't always match neatly with modern taxonomic categories, and the plants themselves may have been different varieties than what we know today. However, chemical analysis of residues from ancient Egyptian vessels has detected compounds consistent with mint family plants, confirming that yes, the ancient Egyptians did use these herbs. Mint family plants share certain characteristics that made them valuable in ancient medicine. They contain volatile oils dominated by compounds like menthol, menthone, and similar molecules that produce the characteristic cool, fresh sensation. These compounds have real pharmacological effects. They act as natural muscle relaxants, particularly affecting the smooth muscles of the digestive tract. They have antimicrobial properties that can help fight harmful bacteria and fungi. They stimulate digestive secretions while simultaneously soothing irritated tissues. And they have mild analgesic properties, helping to reduce pain. The Ebers Papyrus includes prescriptions using what were probably mint family plants for treating stomach complaints, for easing headaches, for treating bad breath, and interestingly, for calming the heart, which in Egyptian medicine referred to both the physical heart and to one's emotional center. This last use is particularly significant because it shows the Egyptians recognized mint's calming psychological effects, not just its physical benefits. When you're suffering from digestive distress, mint soothes your gut. But even when consumed by someone without digestive problems, mint has a refreshing, calming, clarifying effect on the mind. Modern research has extensively studied peppermint and related mints, confirming their medicinal value. A systematic review published in the Journal of Clinical Gastroenterology in 2014 examined multiple clinical trials of peppermint oil for irritable bowel syndrome and found significant benefits. Patients taking peppermint oil capsules experienced reduced abdominal pain, bloating, and other IBS symptoms compared to placebo. The mechanism appears to involve the menthol in peppermint oil blocking calcium channels in smooth muscle cells, causing the muscle to relax. This is exactly what you want when digestive cramping is causing pain and discomfort. For mental calming, peppermint aromatherapy has shown promise in research studies. Inhaling peppermint essential oil has been found to improve alertness while simultaneously reducing anxiety, an interesting combination. Unlike sedatives that calm by dulling mental function, peppermint seems to calm while clarifying, producing a state of relaxed focus. A study published in the International Journal of Neuroscience in 2008 found that peppermint aroma enhanced memory and increased alertness in study participants. The ancient Egyptians may not have understood the neurochemistry, but they certainly observed these effects and put them to use. How did ancient Egyptians use mint family plants? The most common method was as a fresh herb added to drinks and food. Fresh mint leaves would be crushed and added to water or wine, creating a refreshing beverage. This practice continues today throughout Egypt and the Middle East, where mint tea is ubiquitous. The ancient preparation probably wasn't exactly the same as modern mint tea, which typically uses green tea as a base. But the principle of extracting mint's beneficial compounds and pleasant flavor into a hot beverage is ancient. Mint was also used in cooking, both for flavor and for its digestive benefits. Adding mint to rich, heavy foods helps prevent the digestive discomfort such foods can cause. The Egyptians used mint in various dishes, particularly those involving beans or lentils, which can cause gas and bloating. The carminative properties of mint help expel gas and reduce that uncomfortable bloated feeling. Even today, traditional Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cuisines frequently pair mint with legumes, a practice rooted in ancient Egyptian wisdom. For medicinal purposes, more concentrated mint preparations were used. Dried mint could be powdered and mixed with honey to create a medicinal paste, or the fresh herb could be crushed and the juice extracted. Some prescriptions called for mint to be combined with other herbs, creating complex formulas that addressed multiple aspects of an ailment. Mint might be mixed with chamomile for anxiety, with cumin and coriander for digestive problems, or with other herbs for headaches and pain. The cultivation of mint was relatively easy in ancient Egypt, which made it accessible to people of all social classes. Mint plants are perennial and remarkably vigorous, spreading readily and requiring minimal care. They grow well in Egypt's climate, as long as they receive adequate water. The plants could be cultivated in small home gardens, in larger agricultural plots, or even in pots, making fresh mint available to anyone who wanted to grow it. This democratic accessibility meant that mint's healing benefits weren't limited to the wealthy elite but were available to ordinary Egyptians as well. Mint was harvested by cutting the leafy stems, typically just before the plant flowers, when the concentration of essential oils is highest. The fresh herbs could be used immediately, or they could be dried for storage. Drying was done in shade rather than direct sun to preserve the volatile oils that give mint its medicinal properties and characteristic flavor. Properly dried mint retains its potency for months, allowing year-round access to this valuable herb even when fresh plants weren't actively growing. The symbolic and ritual uses of mint in ancient Egypt were less prominent than those of plants like Blue Lotus or frankincense, but mint still played a role in religious and ceremonial life. The fresh, clean scent of mint made it appropriate for purification rituals. Mint was sometimes scattered on floors or crushed and added to bathing water, practices that served both practical purposes, freshen spaces and cleanse the body, and ritual purposes, symbolically purifying and renewing. The association between mint's refreshing qualities and spiritual renewal is ancient and deep. The spread of mint cultivation and use from ancient Egypt throughout the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern world is well documented. The ancient Greeks learned about mint from the Egyptians and adopted it enthusiastically. Greek mythology includes stories about mint, though these were overlaid with Greek cultural elements. The Romans cultivated mint extensively and spread it throughout their empire. By medieval times, mint was grown in monastery gardens throughout Europe, used both medicinally and culinarily, and its ultimate origins in ancient Egyptian and Middle Eastern herbal traditions had been largely forgotten. Today, mint is one of the world's most popular herbs, cultivated on every continent except Antarctica. Peppermint oil is a major commercial product, used in everything from toothpaste to candy to pharmaceuticals. Spearmint, a closely related species with a milder flavor, is equally popular. The global mint industry is worth billions of dollars annually. Yet the fundamental uses, for digestive comfort, for fresh breath, for mental clarity and calm, remain the same as they were when Egyptian farmers first cultivated these aromatic herbs thousands of years ago. For modern people seeking natural remedies for digestive discomfort or mental stress, mint offers an accessible, well-researched, and historically validated option. A cup of peppermint tea costs pennies and has virtually no side effects for most people, yet research confirms it can provide genuine relief for various conditions. Growing your own mint is simple and provides a fresh supply of this beneficial herb. Whether you're using it as the ancient Egyptians did, as a digestive aid and calming beverage, or in the myriad modern applications, you're connecting to thousands of years of human experience with this remarkable plant. The continuity of mint use from ancient Egypt to the present day is striking. Walk through any market in Cairo today, and you'll see huge bunches of fresh mint for sale. Enter any cafe, and you can order mint tea, sweet and refreshing. Visit an Egyptian home, and you'll likely be offered mint tea as hospitality. These modern practices connect directly to ancient traditions, largely unbroken despite thousands of years of history. Despite the rise and fall of civilizations, despite massive cultural and religious changes. The mint plant itself is the thread connecting past and present, still growing, still offering its gifts of digestive comfort and mental calm, still valued by those who know its benefits. The ancient Egyptian understanding of mint, like their understanding of so many plants, was both practical and profound. They knew mint settled upset stomachs because they observed it doing so reliably over centuries. They knew it refreshed and clarified the mind because people told them so. They didn't need to understand menthol or calcium channels or neurotransmitters. They simply needed to pay attention to what worked, to remember it, and to pass that knowledge down. In our modern world, where we sometimes get so caught up in understanding mechanisms that we lose sight of results, the Egyptian approach offers valuable perspective. What matters most isn't whether we can explain exactly how something works at the molecular level. What matters is whether it actually helps people feel better. Mint passed that test thousands of years ago, and it's still passing it today.